Hi, welcome to the gray area, 50 Shades of HR. And today we're joined by Carlos Ledo from the Ledo Law Firm. We're talking about a very, very sensitive subject, right? One that's probably very common in the workplace, probably more common than employers even know about. It's going on, and we're talking about relationships in the workplace. And it's something that every business has to deal with at some point. Every manager deals with it at some point. Even us, you're a human person. You go to work somewhere, you work there 8 hours a day, you're interacting with people, and you start building bonds and relationships with people. And I think that it's important that we talk about that today, whether it's a personal, intimate, consensual relationship, if it's harassment, or even becoming friends and forming cliques
Yeah.
in the organization where, it can become a liability for employers. So I think it's a really, really good topic to talk about. And, it happens every day.
Yeah. I mean, just think about it. We talked about in an earlier episode, you spend probably more time at work than you do at home.
Yeah.
And it's just a situation where some people they work in high stress environments and they end up creating what we call these trauma bonds, right? With individuals they work in. Like if you're a nurse, you end up working with other healthcare professionals,
Hmm.
that are dealing with the same sort of high stress environment where you're dealing with life and death situations. And
Hmm.
also, you work a lot of hours, so it's difficult to go out and socialize with other people. So your main social group is your workplace.
Yeah.
So it's natural to sort of develop relationships in there, but there's things that can teeter on the legal, the illegal, or even just really for the employer, creating a liability for the employer in the long run.
Yeah, and I think that if you're an employer and you have a good number of employees, if you think it's not happening in your workplace, you're probably naive because it probably definitely is
Yeah.
happening in one way or another. Workplace relationships. I've personally had them. My share of workplace relationships, I guess, all under good context and good.
Nothing illegal.
Nothing
Nothing
illegal.
that's violating
But
the things we're going to discuss now.
we're human. You're human. You meet people and you get to know people, and it happens, right? So.
And I think, a lot of people, a
eh,
good example is you think of the workplace as like a high school,
Yeah.
right? You're basically in a high school. You're there all day. You're working. You're there about the same amount of time you used to be in high school, maybe a little bit more in terms of hours
Yeah.
per day. And you're interacting, you're working, things are going to develop in the same forms. When you have groups of individuals working together
Hmm.
and interacting together consistently on a day to day basis for such long periods of times, things are going to develop, whether it be relationships, whether it be social groups, friend groups, things of that nature, factions develop.
Hmm.
And you're going to have that sort of separation like you did in high school. Certain cliques, certain people to date, certain things happen.
Yeah.
As an employer, though, you need to be aware of those things, conscious of them, and get in front of it before things get out of control.
I think that what makes it so dangerous for employers is that it always starts out harmless, right? In the person's mind who's initiating it or starting, it's like it's harmless, or if two people at work have an attraction to one another, let's just go have a drink after work. It starts out harmless, and then I guess it gets to the point where that relationship, if it doesn't work out, and then you got to deal with the breakup drama. It becomes an issue. Besides the fact that it could become a liability issue depending on who in the organization and all that stuff, like what happened with the famous Coldplay
Right. Yeah.
video, in that situation, that just the breakup drama from that must have been
Yeah, no, but I
at
mean,
a whole
even in
different
that
level.
situation, we're dealing with something that crossed the line. Aside from the fact that these individuals,
Of course.
were married and things of that nature,
Yeah, yeah.
the line that was crossed, I think one big demarcation line is, especially when we're talking about harassment and you're talking about dating in the workplace, the power dynamic between the individuals, right?
Mhm.
So whenever it's a subordinate dating a superior, that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
Or when a superior makes advances to a subordinate, you've already created a situation that's a powder keg for liability.
Mhm.
And the reason for that is right from the start, right on its face, it looks as though the subordinate may fear for their job based on whether or not they accept
Right.
this advance from the individual, right?
Like, is that quid pro quo?
You're right. We're
Yeah.
talking about quid pro quo. Where we have an individual where they feel they need to comply
Right.
with this advance, and whether be sexual or just offer for a date, offer for social interaction outside of the office, that they feel if they don't accept, then they're going to be, it's going to be detrimental to their career, and they're going to be harmed by it. Or in some instances, they feel that by accepting, they can advance in their career
Mhm.
and things of that nature, and that's putting the employer at risk. That's creating liability for the employer because that's obviously illegal. You can't go quid pro quo with an employee based on what you want from them physically or from a relationship standpoint, and then
Mhm.
reciprocate with advancement in employment, increase in pay, preferential treatment, things of that nature.
So I guess let's go back to the basics. just start with the very first question. Are relationships in the workplace allowed, or can they be banned entirely? Has an employer, like, if if a client comes to you and says, "Hey, Carlos, I need some legal advice here. How do I handle this workplace relationship
Right.
situation? Do I allow it or not? Do I ban it? How do I
You legally can ban individuals from dating in the workplace. You can
legal?"
create a company policy that
Okay.
does not allow for dating in the workplace, right? I find that to be naive.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
And I
Right.
found it to be counterproductive because then you're going to be spending time regulating individuals' personal lives within the workplace. And
Hmm.
then are you two dating? It seems like you guys are interacting a little too much at the workplace. There's flirtation, is a relationship. It becomes very complicated. I think the best way to go is the easiest way to go is to have individuals, if they do start dating in the workplace, number one, obviously they must still follow company guidelines as it relates to company conduct, how they conduct themselves in the workplace, ensuring there's no distractions in the workplace, ensuring they're completing the functions of their job.
Does that include sneaking off into a closet for a little romantic moment? Like,
Sneaking off to a concert and listening to Coldplay in the VIP section, yes, that's violation.
but yeah, but I mean that would be disruptive. I guess like,
Right. So, and then also you can create policies that limit physical contact
okay, yeah, that's
of
where
a
I was
romantic
going.
nature in the workplace.
Gotcha.
So you can't have physical displays, no PDA in the workplace,
Hmm.
do that outside of the office
Does that
on your
cover
own
does
time.
that cover the parking lot, the car?
It could, depending upon who owns the parking lot,
Really?
right? If the employer owns the building and the parking lot, you are on company property,
Gotcha,
right?
gotcha. Right.
If you lease an office space, now that exterior parking lot doesn't belong to the employer, that's public space now.
Gotcha, gotcha.
So it can get a little bit more complicated when we're talking about those things, but really within the office is what we're talking about. As long as it doesn't create a distraction, right? And you want them to be able to act in a professional manner that doesn't create distractions for others in the workplace,
Hmm.
and it doesn't make it seem like you two are just basically carrying on your relationship within the office, right? You can date, you can do all those things, but what we're here to do is work, and
Right.
we're here to complete our job functions. That's what we're here to do. That's where we start.
At what point does a relationship in the workplace become risky for an employer? Like, where does the risk begin for an employer when
I
it comes
think
to that?
the risk starts immediately. There's liabilities associated with things that are just an innocent relationship, and I think like what I was going to say is the best way to go about it is creating a relationship disclosure document, where if individuals are dating in the workplace, you want them to disclose that to human resources, have them sign a document that states they are dating and they're in a current relationship,
Hmm.
and they've both consented to this relationship, and they are on the same level.
Wow, that's really a great layer of protection right there. So
Right.
you can, so once you identify, like, I guess there's a lot of gray area. Again, this is this name of our podcast, but it's, once you identify there's a relationship going on in the
Even
workplace.
if you don't identify it, I think you can have a company policy that
Oh,
requires individuals to
across the board.
disclose
Okay.
their dating, that
Okay.
they're in a relationship.
So they have to disclose. You
They
put the
have to
burden
disclose
on
it.
them to
You put the
disclose it.
burden on them to come forward and disclose it, and they sign the form, they
Gotcha.
document it, and it's safe. Because then what ends up happening is, the real risk is first when it comes to a different disparity in terms of level, when you
Right.
have like we talked about a subordinate and a superior, that shouldn't occur in the workplace. That should be outlawed completely because that already lends itself to liability.
Immediate
So
risk.
you should not have that. If individuals are in a similar, either on the same level or different departments but similar levels, or they don't report to each other, then we're okay.
Hmm.
Okay, disclose the relationship. That's ongoing. That's fine. You could also disclose it when the relationship ends. Because what ends up happening is now you've created a layer of disclosure and protection that if the relationship ends poorly, now we know that at least initially there was no harassment.
Hmm.
Anything that occurs after this is something that now we can look at with a different set of eyes.
Hmm.
So the risk involved is like we talked about. An individual starts dating someone, they have a good relationship until they don't. They break up. Things get a little tense around the office.
Hmm.
One of them consistently pursues the other, and the other does not
These
reciprocate.
these are red flags that the employer should be looking out for.
Employers and employees. So when we're talking about harassment in the workplace, part of the safeguards are that you want your employees to feel comfortable enough. One, if harassment is occurring
Hmm.
to them, that they come forward with a complaint of harassment or a notification to the employer of harassment. So an investigation can take place and action can be taken on
Hmm.
behalf of that employee. The other thing is other employees that are, sort of outside of the scope of the harassment that are collateral to it should also be reporting these instances because maybe the individual that's being harassed doesn't feel comfortable or they don't feel safe
Hmm.
in reporting the harassment. And then they can act on their behalf by reporting it to management. Management can investigate it and appropriate action can be taken.
And for our employer friends out there, I guess harassment, that line of harassment is crossed when the person that's receiving the attention, it's unwanted attention. I guess, is that what defines
So yeah,
harassment in this case?
harassment. To be honest, it could be just the main point to take from it is it's not the intent of the action; it's how the action is received.
Intent versus impact.
Exactly.
Yep.
So what we're talking about is, I can be, I can make a joke or a comment about you physically and say, oh, the blouse looks lovely on you. It fits your body so nicely. My intent is innocent. I'm just complimenting on what you're wearing.
Right.
You may take that as a sexual comment that, oh, why is he staring at my body?
If you said it to me, I would, and I
Exactly.
would be
But I
offended.
would be honest. I wouldn't be lying. But the thing is that now the individual receiving that compliment feels like they've been harassed.
Yeah.
And really, the demarcation line is not my intent when I said what I said, it's how you received it. If you received it as harassment, if you felt uncomfortable, it made you feel as though I was now ogling you sexually, then that's harassment.
Yep.
Something as simple as, an individual has an aversion to being touched. You don't like, some people don't like being touched.
Mhm.
And someone comes up to you and puts their hands on your shoulder and you say, I'm sorry, but I don't like being touched. Please take your hand off my shoulder. Now that individual comes by every morning just to bother you and taps you on the shoulder
Mm.
and taps you on the shoulder.
Mhm.
That's a form of cumulative harassment. That's harassment. You're doing that specifically to cause that person mental anguish, right, at
Okay.
the workplace, and that person no longer feels safe there because they feel like it's being done to them on purpose, and it creates a feeling of discomfort that is not something that should go on in the workplace.
And this falls under Title VII, right?
Right.
Because it's based on your gender, I guess, or what are they based the
Well,
harassment on legally?
harassment, it can take different shapes and forms, right?
Mhm.
So this sort of harassment maybe doesn't rise to criminal levels of harassment, but it is harassment in the sense of you're violating this person's space.
Correct.
They aren't feeling safe at the workplace, and that could be something that disciplinary action can actually be taken. Now, if we're discriminating somebody based on, or we're harassing on someone based on their sexual orientation, their gender,
Mhm.
their religion, their political views, whatever the case may, their age,
Right.
something that's protected, right? If they are in a protected class and you are harassing them based on their membership and as part of being in that protected class, then you've illegally harassed them. Now you've crossed the line into an action that legal action can be taken against you, or even criminal action.
Mhm.
Obviously, if we have physical contact with an individual that rises to the level of a physical assault or a sexual assault, then you can face criminal charges. Something as simple as patting on someone in the buttocks,
Mhm.
that could be seen as sexual assault.
So, what about, let's say, a high-level executive or manager with an employee? I mean, like a business owner or CEO, it's like everybody underneath him pretty much would be considered manager supervisor kind of
Hmm.
situation, right? I mean, you'd have to be the higher level you are, or if you're an owner of a company, you have to be extra careful in the way that you, I guess, conduct yourself, and also, I guess, set the example, I guess, for your employees.
Right, and the more restricted your dating pool essentially in the workplace becomes,
But if it's consensual, is it still? It still would be
it still sends the wrong message,
gotcha.
and it's still dangerous because it's consensual until it's not. Right.
Correct. Yeah.
So, and the individual, if you're a CEO and you're dating someone who's an HR manager, to give the Cole Clay example,
Hmm.
they could feel as if though it's quid pro quo, like they're being forced into this relationship, and if they don't, agree to it,
Hmm.
that they could face consequences in terms of losing their job. Or it could be a situation, even if it devolves later, and they could come back and say, "Listen, from the beginning, I didn't feel comfortable,
Hmm.
even though it may have been consensual." You're putting in the hands of the courts. You're putting in the hands the judicial system to make a determination, or a mediator, or whatever the case may be, to make a determination as to what is real and what isn't real.
What if I find out as an employer that one of my managers is dating their own employee, or it's happening in my company? What do I do? Like, how do I stop it? How do I handle that situation immediately?
You need to sit down and have a conversation with that manager because they are the supervisor.
Hmm.
You need to point to your company policy if you have one as it relates to dating in the workplace,
Hmm.
specifically when it relates to subordinates and those that are in charge of them, and superiors, and then determine whether or not this requires discipline of the manager, right? Or what actions can be taken to separate
Or
the
transferring?
manager, right? You can maybe able to move the employee to a different department or to a different manager,
Hmm.
and have that sort of not interfere. So long as that individual, the superior, still can't make decisions as to whether the person can keep their job, not keep their job, if they can receive employee increases, make determinations on time off, whatever the case may be.
Employee morale. I mean, what about the other employees in the department or other
Right.
employees in the company who see, hey, this person's being favored for whatever reason or whatever it
And
may be?
sometimes it's not even true, but
Yeah.
just the appearance
The
of it,
perception.
the perception lends itself to that. So you're creating these situations that should be avoided, but are trigger points for individuals that you don't even think about. So everything could be fine. You may not be discriminating. You may not be treating somebody more favorable than another,
Hmm.
but other employees may feel that. They may see certain things that they think are being used, can use as fuel for that sort of argument.
And what about when, let's say when the breakup happens, or like you say, it's consensual until it isn't, you know, and you know that the breakup is creating tension, it's creating problems in the workplace. How can an employer address that? Should they step in at that point in
Right.
time? You know, how do they handle that?
I think that's a fine line. Again, we're talking about a gray area where now you need to determine whether or not this is creating a distraction in the workplace, if
Hmm.
it's affecting employee productivity, if it's affecting others in the workplace. Those are things that all have to be considered. So it's kind of subjective. It's a case by case basis.
Hmm.
If it is creating distractions, if it is causing problems with productivity, it is if it's stopping individuals from performing their job, then you need to address it, and you need to follow guidelines within the company handbook
Hmm.
to address that.
And even on a lighter level, one of the lighter shades of gray, I guess, so to speak, in our podcast, is the light joking or the flirting, right? Because it's flirting does happen. So where's the line when it comes to joking or flirting? Is it based on, again, intent versus impact? The person receiving
Yeah.
it is basically
It's
so.
intent versus impact, and it's the thing is the rule of thumb I like to give people during harassment trainings is if you wouldn't say it in front of your family,
Mhm.
don't say it
In the workplace.
in the workplace.
Gotcha.
So, like, if you say something to a coworker, and it's something that would embarrass you if your parents heard it, if your children heard it,
That's a good
if your
rule of
friends
thumb.
heard it, if people that you hold dear to your heart, you would say that in front of them and would make you feel embarrassed that you said that in front of them,
Mhm.
don't say it.
Gotcha, gotcha. Except for when you go to a conference a few thousand miles away, and everybody's at the conference all
Yeah.
day, and then they go to the bar at the end of of this, whatever it
Here,
may
here's
be.
here's a hot legal tip. If it happens in Vegas, it doesn't stay in Vegas.
It doesn't
It's still
exactly.
illegal.
You still have to conduct yourself
Right.
in a professional manner, even if you are far away, you're going to be in situations where you're going to be drinking or going out after hours and things like that. So that can, I
And you know
guess,
what?
maybe limit that. I guess if you
And you
feel like it's going to
think
be an issue for you, I
people
guess.
think that because they're in a conference and they have, this free time where they're hanging out together, that there's actually less restrictions. You're actually widening the scope of what can be liable
Really?
because you're there for work the entire time. You're there for
Wow.
a work conference, and any functions you take with other coworkers, especially if you're wearing branded material, if you're there in the same hotel, if you're
Hmm.
all doing the same sort of activities,
Hmm.
could be construed as being work activities
Right.
because that's the purpose of your visit there.
And the consensualness could be questioned if you've been under the influence of alcohol or somebody's
Exactly.
inebriated,
Right.
that type of thing
and,
too.
and
So,
now you are lowering someone's defenses. They're more likely or more adept to be able to be influenced. And who knows? Maybe there's other accusations that can arise from that of maybe being drugged or maybe something happening or purposely being, given drinks to the point where they're unconscious and things happen and
mhm.
then they didn't consent to that.
Yeah, yeah. This is part of that gray area. These are things that happen and happens every day and happens in real life. I've seen it many times in my career where I'm dealing with clients who call me and say, "Hey, I need you to come investigate something." I had to fly to Chicago to deal with one where it was very sensitive. So it does happen. What about beyond romantic relationships at work? Because there's friendships at work that become very intense, right? And if there's a falling out, that becomes toxic. Or friendships at work where you and I create a bond, and or we create a clique, and people outside of that clique may feel like they're outside of a clique, or they're not participating in things, and special events happen. Does that ever become an issue in the workplace?
Yeah, it becomes an issue when the individuals that are sort of in that clique or the friendship bonds create discriminatory or retaliatory action towards the other individuals in the workplace. So, like, if you promote only your friends, or you and your friends only are the only ones that are able to access certain things within, the office, or
Hmm.
do things within the office to the exclusion of others,
Yeah.
where you're excluding others or restricting their access to things or treating them differently,
Hmm.
that becomes a problem. Where you're harassing individuals verbally, where you are all sort of, the mean girls clique or the mean boys clique, and attacking others, making fun of them, doing things of that nature, making others feel harassed, then
Hmm.
you are obviously violating company policy, maybe the law, depending on what it is you do. So those are all things that need to be looked at.
Or even favoring somebody. Like, and it also happened in family relationships, right? Where
Nepotism.
nepotism. Where does that become an issue? I guess
Yeah, I mean,
from
it
that
becomes an
perspective.
issue where it's an employee. That's even more difficult because you have to be able to prove as the individual that you feel aggrieved that the family member has been given preferential treatment and they've been offered promotional opportunities or pay increases or access to things
Hmm.
that they otherwise wouldn't have received if they weren't the family member of the supervisor or the person in charge
Hmm.
that's making these decisions. So if you feel that you've been slighted or you feel that you've missed out on these opportunities, and someone that's unworthy, that happens to be a family member,
Mhm.
has been given these opportunities, and you have the door opens to that case. At least on its face, it looks that way.
Mhm.
If you could back it up with evidence, then the company's liable.
Something I hear a lot from employers is that, when I come in and talk to them about, "Hey, listen, we need to, get these policies in place, get a handbook in place, and get these things established for you." I get pushback sometimes from business owners that tell me, "This is our culture. Our company culture is that we joke with each other. Our company culture is that we do have a bar at work and we drink. The boss may have a little bar in his little office, and after work they all drink and stuff like that." How do you I struggle with that sometimes because it's kind of like, that culture that you have is creating a problem, and it can create a toxic culture, I guess, if it's not handled properly. But I do get that a lot. Like, there's our company culture. We joke around a lot. We poke fun of people a lot, or we're kind of flirty, and that's just our culture. How do you what do you suggest, or how do I address that with a client that he tells me that?
Ultimately, it's you can guide them, you can give them all the information in the world,
Hmm.
but ultimately it's their decision,
Yeah.
right? If they want to have that culture, if they want to go ahead and have drinks at the office,
Hmm.
if they want to do all these things that are placing liability or opening the door to liability on them,
Hmm.
and you're advising them not to, this their company.
Yep.
They're going to ultimately choose to do what they want to choose. Now, they can't turn around and say, "Well, why am I facing this lawsuit? Why am I saying, well, we warned you,
Yeah.
we told
Exactly.
you."
Right.
Now you're going to have to deal with the consequences of your actions. It's like anybody else. It's like
Yeah.
an individual. You know the rules of the road, right?
Yeah.
It could be 55 miles an hour. If you decide to go 90, that's on you, right? And then
And
they
if you
pull
get
you
caught,
over. And if somebody was going faster than you were, but they pull you over, you can't say, well, you didn't pull the person that was going
right?
105 over.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, buddy, you were still breaking the law, right?
Correct. Exactly.
It's not a question of whether, who broke the law worse. You
Hmm.
broke the law, right? So these are consequences of your actions. And ultimately, employers need to decide, how hard of a line do they want to draw?
Right.
How much risk do they want to be taking on? What's their risk tolerance level?
Hmm.
That's all their choice.
Yep.
But ultimately, it's up to them. And, we're talking about things like having drinks at work, in the office, things of that nature. There's things that people don't even think about. What if that person has too much to drink and ends up getting into a car accident?
Right. There's a huge
Now
risk.
you're liable as the employer because you supplied the alcohol.
Even for holiday parties and things like that, you have to
You
be.
have to be very careful.
Yeah, 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 exactly. And holiday parties is also a place where people let loose. They drink
Yep,
more. They party harder. So you have to be careful as a company perspective to let somebody drive home with the
exactly.
influence or
Inebriated. You need
something.
to take all the measures to make sure that the employees are okay to safe to drive home.
And now we're also in the social media age, right? So let's say in the workplace, you have an employee slipping into another employee's DMs inappropriately, right? Sliding into their DMs, I guess, is so to speak. What if something inappropriate happens in that in a social media, arena like Facebook, Instagram, that type of thing, where maybe inappropriate texting is happening, inappropriate pictures, and it's happening after hours.
I've had many cases like that.
Um, and does the company still carry liability in that situation?
Not necessarily if they aren't aware of it, they don't.
Okay.
Generally,
Okay.
but the question is now, can you discipline employees for this? You can. Because but for their meeting at the workplace and they're exchanging information,
Right.
this wouldn't happen. And also now they have to deal with each other on a daily basis at the workplace. So
Hmm.
now that crosses over into the work arena. I've had instances where individuals have gone and looked up employee information without consent,
Hmm.
gotten their phone number, their address, and started texting them. Hey, listen, I'd love to go on a date with you,
Hmm.
or sent them gifts to their house, or shown up to ask for a date at the home by obtaining this information that's confidential in the
Hmm.
employee records without the employee consent.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's obviously
That's really
something that can be disciplined.
yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So if one of our employer friends or business owners listening and watching us right now, and they're thinking to themselves, I probably have this happening right now, like, what should they do?
You got to take immediate action. I think, if it's too late, you've got to react as quickly as possible. I would reach out to counsel to make sure the steps that you're taking, or maybe your PEO, to make sure that the steps you're taking are compliant
Hmm.
and that you're going the safest route, that you're not creating more liability for yourself,
Right.
and ensuring that things are handled in the appropriate manner. The other thing is you could do on the front end, you need to make sure you establish protocols, procedures, codes of conduct within the workplace in your handbook that are documented, that can sort of create the lay of the land for how employees should be acting and what they should be doing, and know the consequences that
Right.
may face.
So what are some of the policies that they should put in place from the very beginning of their handbook? Like the policy should be
Like we talked about, you got to have a relationship disclosure clause. Make
okay,
sure that you
for
have a
sure. So
policy that
make sure
discloses
they always have
relationships,
to disclose a relationship.
right?
That's going
Make
to
sure
protect you the
that
most.
you outlaw subordinates and superiors dating in the workplace.
Hmm.
That's important. And then have codes of conduct. You need to have a progressive disciplinary plan outlined in your handbook.
Hmm.
So, obviously, verbal warning, written warning, final warning, what those steps are, but also note that you could skip the entire disciplinary process and go straight to termination if it warrants it, based on the seriousness of the acts. So, for instance, if you harass someone at the workplace, let's say you grab someone's butt or you grab someone's breast,
Hmm.
do something to that level, you can be terminated immediately. There's no progressive discipline. These are
Right.
things that you have violated that individual in a sexual manner that requires discipline. It could even be criminal.
Sure.
So those you could bypass that progressive disciplinary plan to enact termination.
Wow. Definitely, this is one of those gray areas, right? I mean, because, like, for example, like what happened with like the Coldplay thing, right? That was consensual. It was after hours. It was, I guess on a personal thing, but there was consequences because of that.
Well,
There
you're
was
also dealing
definitely,
with a CEO and his HR
yeah,
director or
yeah,
vice president, a subordinate,
right, right,
in
right,
effect.
yeah,
If she had a better attorney, she could have turned around and said that she was only there because she felt compelled to do so because of his position,
right, right, right,
and she could have sued the company.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But I think they handled that with a non-disclosure agreement and
yeah.
a quick settlement.
It's crazy how that really sparked a lot of controversy and it brought that subject to light, for us to have this conversation today, so to speak. So definitely one of the shades of the gray area. Thank you, Carlos, for everything that you shared today with this subject, which is, like I said, it's a gray area now with dating and relationships in the
Not
workplace.
with Diddy, with dating.
Yeah, Not- that's a whole
That's a whole
different.
other conversation for
Diddy
that.
is a whole different one. So not Diddy, dating in the workplace. But this is definitely one of those areas that we are happy to cover. And thank you, Carlos, again for your insight on the subject matter. And with that said, thank you for tuning into the gray area, 50 Shades of HR, and we'll catch you in the next episode.